So we are on the corn pivot, the no-till corn pivot that we looked at earlier in this year, where we were no-till planting it into wheat stubble. And so we're about 4 days from them coming to chop this for silage, and just letting things dry down. Water's been off here, let's see, about 5 days, I want to say. So we're just kind of letting things dry down now for them to come in and chop with the trucks and heavy equipment. So yeah, crop grew well out here in the wheat stubble. Stand was good, emerged well, and yeah, kind of the past, saw more of the same stuff we'd seen from the past few years, where we don't have to water as much, water holds longer, ground just stays cooler, it seems like. So yeah, things progressed nicely this year and looked good. I was able to, you know, I can run my pivot so much slower that I feel like under conventional corn growing methods and what we used to do, conventionally tilling it, that when we would dam or dike this, that we'd have to run the pivot so fast to not get the water to run off of it, even with the dikes. Or if we put down too much, we'd break the dikes, and then you're kind of back to square one. So it seemed like the corn was always being kept wet every, you know, day and a half to a day, that it was cooling the plant down continually, just over and over and over again. And it seemed like, comparing it to other ground that was, say, like gravity irrigated ground, where it never really gets cooled down that much, the corn, where I can slow the pivots down a lot more in this no-till ground, it seems to mature a little quicker, because the time between revolutions is longer, and so the corn has time to kind of, I guess, warm back up. It's not being cooled down nearly as much by the pivot, cooling it down. So it seems like that has helped speed the maturity a little bit also. We'd run anywhere from 4/10 to ½ inch, and now I'm running 8/10 with no runoff, and so almost slowing it down twice as much. Yeah. So it takes about 52, 53 hours to make a whole revolution, and before it would take like 28 to 30.
And then too, you have to think about that deeper kind of subsoil moisture, allowing roots to get deeper, grow deeper, which is increasing your drought resilience in those times of high ET. That's
right. That's why I don't worry too much about going off for a few days, because I know I've got a lot of sub moisture that it can draw from. So, and you know, if the chopper guys are a few days late, I'm not like, hey, hurry up and get here, my corn's bone dry. Right. I still have some moisture there. And even if they decide to come today, they would not mess up my field, because there's more structure here to this field than just a traditionally tilled field that just you drive over and it's just compacted immediately if it's has any kind of moisture to it. Yeah, I think next year I'll probably terminate the wheat cover crop a little bit sooner, not let it get quite so big, and then hopefully combat some of the vole pressure that we had, because it seems like once it gets big and tall, then there's just no getting them out. The predators can't come in and get them because they can't find them. So I think I would terminate a little bit sooner than I had last year, because this wheat got pretty good sized. So I think I would terminate a little bit sooner, but that was probably one of the only things I would change, other than adding maybe a little bit more nitrogen early on to take that carbon penalty out of play. So I've got black beans planted here, and this spring I wanted to plant a cover crop in here so that I wouldn't have to come back and dam or dike these beans. So I planted a mix of wheat and barley in here just to get some growth out here. Back in, I want to say it was about the middle of March when I planted this. And then the cover crop came up good. And then just planted green, and then came out and sprayed the day after I planted these beans. And as you can see, the beans are coming up well, and they look good. So hopefully the beans will outgrow all this residue, and will continue to grow well. So we had hail that came through here, a couple different hailstorms, and the residue really protected these beans well, and it crusted some ground in areas that
didn't have any residue, like on fields that were clean tilled. This field here, I didn't have to rotary hoe or you know, anything like that, because the residue protected the ground so well. So that was one advantage. And with these beans, I plan on either swathing them because they're an upright variety, or if I can do it, I'll use the combine and stump them. So we'll just have to see what happens at the end of the season. Yeah, so I'm hoping it'll be kind of a good experiment this year, because I've never planted beans into this tall of residue, that I'm hoping that most of this residue will stay standing tall like it is, that the beans will actually grow a little taller, grow taller throughout the year than if they wouldn't have had this residue and the cover crop that's standing tall. So I'm hoping that it'll keep the beans standing well and high enough that it won't be an issue to swath or to possibly stump them.
So I'm a few days away from desiccating these beans, and as you can see, the leaves are pretty well crumpled up and dead. We had a frost here last week when it got cold, and so it kind of shut the beans down at this point. But yeah, I'm still going to desiccate these beans to get them to dry out. I've got some weeds in the field that need to be killed and desiccated, so I'll do that later this week, probably Thursday or Friday, which is in about 2 or 3 days. And yeah, I'm happy with how the beans turned out in the cover crop here. I was able to use quite a bit less water. It seemed like I always expected there to be a lack of moisture, even though I'd only water for 4 or 6 days with the pivot. And I'd go out and I'd have great moisture. And so I kind of had to train myself to just turn it off more often, because under our normal bean watering practices with conventional tillage and dammer diking, it seems like I would just run steady all summer long. And in this situation, I didn't water nearly as much as I usually did. So I think this is only the second year I've grown these stand-up black beans that I've got, and it seemed to me like the cover crop delayed the maturity of them a little bit. It wasn't terrible, but it was a little bit. It just seemed like the plant was just a little slower this year. So, you know, when you get an early frost, that kind of hurts a little bit, but typically we don't get a frost quite this early. So the beans are standing up nicely like this variety does, and so overall happy. I think I had a little bit more nitrogen tie-up than I thought I would with this barley cover crop, so I think I may have lacked a little bit of nitrogen in this field. So if I do this again next year, I'll add some more nitrogen to this field to kind of compensate for that. So we had put manure on here a few years ago, and so I was relying on some of the manure release from this field, but also I used a fish product that I use in furrow. And so it's a little unconventional, but we've had good luck with using fish hydrolysate on other crops. So I used it on this field here, and that was basically the fertility. I just used 7 gallons of fish in furrow and some other microbials that I was just trying to get the microbes to release what was here already. And so that was the fertility program. I would have to go back and look at my sheet that I keep track of it on, but I would say, you know, 2 to 3 inches less, probably. So yeah, it was enough to make a good difference.
Did you feel like you were able to keep up when we had those really, really high temperatures for long periods of time this summer? I did. That's when I was surprised that I'd come out here and dig and it had good moisture. And it was, you know, the pivot was close to being at that same spot again. And so I knew that I could go off, you know, for a couple days and then come back on. And so yeah, I was able to keep up a lot better than we had been able to in the past years with conventional tillage. Yes, yeah, you know, it was one of those learning experiences where the barley was knee-high in most places when I planted this, and just planting green into it, I wasn't sure exactly how it would emerge, how deep to plant, population-wise, if I should adjust it compared to conventional tillage. And I pretty much did the same population I would have normally done and about the same depth as I normally would have done. And the beans all came up great. You couldn't see them for a long time. You couldn't see them for about a month and a half, until you could finally start to see them through the rows of barley. But yeah, stand was great here.
I will say one pretty good sized challenge in this field was just vole pressure. And it seems like you have this much cover and they just can hide. They just run around underneath there, and you don't see it when they're small because you can't see the beans very well when they're small, so it's hard to really scout for it. But as the beans got larger and larger, you could see, you know, circles where the voles had eaten it out. And it's not like it was tremendous damage by any means, but there was definitely some damage out here from the voles. So definitely a challenge to think about how to overcome. But that was probably the biggest challenge in this field. No, not a bit. The field man was quite surprised that we didn't have mold issues, especially with all the cover that we planted into out here. He had some other varieties or some other black beans, the same variety as this, and some other varieties that he has in places. And he said that there was, they were mold free most of the season, and then we had that smoke kind of roll in. He said the mold kind of exploded with the higher humidity, but he looked out here and I looked, and I didn't see any mold at all. So we didn't have that issue this year. So I'll desiccate in a few days, like I was saying, and then the interval between spraying and harvest on the label is 7 days. So I have to wait at least 7 days. And so as soon as I can get in and the moisture is okay, then I'll just come in with my combine and my draper head and just stump these with my combine. So yeah, I'm hoping that the barley, the residue left will help the beans come in to on the header, not have much header loss, and where the beans stand up nicely, I think the reel will be able to bring it into the combine nicely. So that's the plan for harvest.
First we sprayed these another time with Bassigram and Raptor. These are seed beans. We had a couple of cold snaps. We had some real hot heat. So it wasn't, I don't think, a typical year, but they look all right. They're starting to dry down and color up a little bit. The field probably isn't as even as I'd like it to be, but things aren't usually go the way you want anyways, so.
Why do you think it's not as even as you'd like it to be?
The heat and the cold, and also probably my uneven residue from the combine from the past season. That's where the light spots are, is the chaffer rows. Those are starting to get a little bit of color on them, but so they're coming.
Nice.
The green stripes, I think, is probably the chaffer rows. That's I thrashed it with the direction going with the pivot, and I believe that's what's causing those. The beans didn't come up as fast in those chaff rows, so that's why they're maybe a little bit behind the other beans, because they a little slower coming up there, a couple of days behind. Yeah, and you know, beans really, I think, like that 85 degree, 80 to 90 degree weather. If we have that consistently, I think that's when we get our best crops. Volar mice damage, yeah.
What have you been seeing with that?
They were just eating the seed out of the bean. I haven't, and then that's been kind of surprising too. I thought maybe with the residue that I would have more mold issues, but I haven't had any.
That's great news.
And all my neighbors have mold, and
what about
I was looking for it. didn't have any insect issues. So maybe that's a plus too.
Okay, so this is a Case International 1020 flexible grain platform, and the flexible cutter bar technology is not new. This has been used primarily for harvesting soybeans in the Midwest and the East for 40 years probably. And what we're doing is a little bit different in the fact that we're using it in an edible bean harvest. They've been doing a lot of trials in North Dakota using flexible cutter bar platforms to direct harvest beans rather than rod cutting the beans. And what that does is that allows us to leave our biomass in place without soil disturbance. Once you get into no-till, the distribution of the residue becomes critical, and that's a good example of why right there.
Right.
Because you end up with uneven soil conditions across your field.
Working on some gravity drip tape with a different company, and just refining the no-till and just playing around with it some more. I've got the chaff spreader for the combine, so another one, so hopefully that will improve my residue management. We'll find out this fall.
Hey everybody, this is Cooper Brossy here again. We're here to catch you guys up on our organic no-till pinto bean field where we roller crimped some cereal rye and planted pinto beans. Since your last visit, we grew a few beans. We replanted some beans that didn't come up very well. And we've grown probably 3 or 4 crops of rye actually. The rye we roller crimped didn't die very well, so we crimped it again a couple days later, and it came back from those 2 crimpings over the summer and did definitely offer some competition to the beans that we planted. When we replanted using the same drill, we further disturbed and killed some of the rye. So it's clear in areas that we replanted that rye was suppressed by a second pass with the no-till drill. Nonetheless, we still have a lot of volunteer rye, and it remains a mystery to us why the rye is so virulent and so strong, not able to be, it's just not dying. So we didn't really want to go back to forage crop in this field for a while. If you're okay with producing rye as forage, then it's a gateway to forage. So if any of you out there have thoughts on that, observations, we'd really enjoy to hear your feedback on that. So we were sort of on the fence of even harvesting this field, whether we were gonna turn the cows in on it or do something else, but we pulled the combine in and there were actually some beans there, so we kept at it. There weren't very many beans and there was plenty of rye. We swathed the field with our little swather, and that's something we wanted to do regardless of if we harvested or not, because we wanted to test these methodologies and see what we could learn from this year.
So when we swathed in the same direction as the rolled rye, we had no problem. When we got to our end rows and the swather was running at an angle to or across the direction of rolled rye, it seemed to do fine as well. The rye was flat enough and the swather was not having a trouble clogging up or anything. Partly that's because we were running really new sharp knives and the swather was working really well. It was really prime conditions. When we went to harvest and we were using the pickup on the combine, we had no trouble where the rye was laying in the same direction as the windrow, but where rolled rye was laying at an angle to the travel direction of the combine, it definitely picked up more rye than you'd want. So we sort of learned a critical height where we needed to run the header to be able to effectively pick up our windrow and not pick up any extra non-crop material. Really, it wasn't too bad of a deal at all. Just a few places where we slowed down a little bit and raised the header so we weren't getting so much extra material in the combine. From the get-go, there's a stand difference. Obviously, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but we just did not have enough beans for comfort in the no-till side. After the replant, we probably had enough of a stand, but unfortunately on September 8th, we had a really chilly morning, actually 2 mornings in a row right around then where we're right at freezing, and that just toasted what beans we had. If we'd not had that frost, the no-till side would have yielded adequately. So it was really frustrating. You know, of course, that same frost impacted the conventional tillage side, and we definitely lost a few beans over there as well. But we managed to eke out a fair yield on that side. A notable difference really is the no-till side really had no weeds per se. Our conventional tillage side had plenty of weeds, and that's unfortunate. It was really surprising to see how effective the rye mat was at really suppressing the weeds. We had a few volunteer potatoes from the previous crop, and of course we had a lot of rye, which, you know, you could say is a weed in this case. But we had no other issue with standard problem weeds that we have. Well, we're going to continue pushing forward with trying to do no-till and really minimum disturbance bean production, edible bean production. We think we'll next year go to planting in rows, probably on a 22-inch center, and we'll set up a planter so that we end up parting open the rye just slightly and having a little tiny strip of bare soil and loosening that soil a little bit to have a slightly more friable seed bed. We're not really going to call it strip till, but it's mini strip till. We think we need more sunlight on the ground. We need beans to go into warm ground and get up and get going quicker. So not only do we want them to go into a little bit softer ground, but have direct sun access on the seed line and not have any rye in the way as the seed comes out of the ground. We did observe bean cotyledons coming up, trying to push through the rye mat and actually getting snapped off because they couldn't push through that heavy rye mat. So we think we just need to open that up a little bit. And another big change is we're a little bit frustrated with the rye and how we haven't been able to kill it effectively. So we have planted some Austrian winter peas, and hopefully we'll have a decent enough stand of peas in the spring to roller crimp those and try to no-till beans into the peas. We've grown a lot of peas in the past, but we've never really tried it doing it this way, you know, killing peas with a roller crimper and planting a cash crop into them. So that'll be another adventure, but we think we can kill them better than the rye the way things have gone this year.
In other words, we're not giving up.
Well, I think the biggest need is for all of us to just keep trying. We took a big leap this year and devoted a lot of acres to this experiment. And as I said before in previous episodes, we kind of thought what we were doing, but we never put all the pieces together in one place. And we've definitely learned a lot from that experience. So it might be disappointing to some, it's definitely disappointing to us, but we are learning some things and we just got to keep trying. And I would advocate for additional support to growers who want to take these risks by entities that can offer that, either with technical oversight, technical support, other growers who can share and offer that sort of neighborly camaraderie so that we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. I'm sure we've done things wrong here that other people know not to do, and either we just didn't look hard enough, didn't do our homework, or you know, we didn't find the right people to talk to maybe. And so I'd also advocate for additional university and you know, federal support for these sorts of efforts. And we really need to be having a space where people can take these risks, either on a research farm or on producers' fields, where we can push the boundaries here and try these things without huge economic stress being put on our operations. Because we're kind of feeling that this time of go around, and hopefully we'll make that out alive, but we just need to keep at it and be careful maybe how much risk we take, but look for opportunities to mitigate those risks with good partnerships and advocacy organizations. Well, firstly, I just want to thank you, Jackie, and the folks here in Twin at the NRCS for your enthusiasm and support during this year, and all the other folks in the Magic Valley Soil Health Forum who've been interested and engaged. Really appreciate your attention, and we really like your feedback. You know, we all need to work together to improve these practices, whether it's on our farm or someone else's. So let's keep up the good collaboration.